build a layered system of a prioritized outreach. It's good to have a cold sequence running to people in your ICP. On top of that, try to see who is a little bit more interested. It's okay to use some of the other intent data out there just to see if it works. And on top of that, always go higher in terms of priority. And the higher you go in terms of the value of a specific signal, the more personalized you should be in approaching that prospect. So see it really as different layers that I think you could give different responsibilities to different reps, or you could give them with that view. That's up to the way your company works. But I think giving them that layered, I call it like augmented reality glasses over their market that they are targeting. Yeah, that's for me. That is a rep on steroids for me. Someone that really can look into his market and see, okay, today this is the person I need to catch.
Welcome to the Sales Consultant Podcast. My name is Derek Williams, and I'm your host. In this episode, I have the honor of interviewing Samuel Verhegge, the co-founder of Revenue Precision, a B2B sales consulting firm that specializes in sales operations consulting, SDR-as-a-Service, and providing fractional SDR management. I hope you enjoy the conversation as we navigate through the intersection of refining your total addressable market down to your obtainable market and some very innovative and highly effective prospecting strategies that you can use to engage with those obtainable prospects.
First of all, thank you for the invite. I think it's great to have this conversation and to always learn from each other.
Yeah.
First of all, my name is Sam, and I'm indeed the co-founder of Revenue Precision for, I think, a little over 3 years now. Also a dad of 2 girls, which is another whole episode as such, right?
Dad of 3 myself. I'm there with you. Yeah. Girl
congrats,
dad club.
Congrats.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're like running 2 jobs at the same time almost, but still you can learn a lot from being a dad, also in how to do good sales. So that's interesting for me. What else? I love cycling, and I got into sales already quite early in when I was 16. I think I got like the first appetite and wanting to understand how that goes. But really, when we started Revenue Precision...
What were you selling at 16? I mean, I'm sure it was an lemonade stand, but
almost.
You got into... Yeah.
Almost. Actually, we had to build like a business plan, and it was all about, okay, how to actually address a market needs. And I was the school where I was at was also... There was also like a primary care... How did you say it? Primary care school? No, that's not like the children from 4 to 10, something like that.
Yeah, elementary.
Okay, elementary. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we saw a lot was the parents wanted to have like birthday parties for their kids but they did not necessarily have the time to organize them. So our business model was, okay, let's ask those parents, what are you willing to pay for us to organize your child's birthday party, and in which team would you like to do that? And there was actually like a project that we did during 1 year, and I was the sales director. So that's where I, for the first time, had to go out and speak to parents and say, oh, so when is your kid's birthday exactly?
So were you going door to door with this, or was this just like the parents at the school, or how are you soliciting new accounts?
So yeah, it's a good question, because I understood quite fast that the parents, they're coming to pick up their kids at school, so it's the perfect timing to catch them, and they are focused audience. Yeah, exactly. So that's how it went basically, and from then on I tried to escape sales quite a while as well, because I was also a bit touched by that experience in a way that, wow, so you're constantly building relationships in order to sell them something. Sounds a bit
sound icky.
Exactly. But just because I wasn't yet fully aware of, okay, no, I think today more about sales is for me much more about the capacity you have or the speed at which you are able to build real relationships today. I think that's where you can really go beyond nowadays. So going back to your question then on why Revenue Precision, that was when we were working at a sales enablement tool, me and my 2 co-founders. We actually were the first employees, and we had to build customer success and support. So basically that was making sure that your first customers are successful in using a sales enablement tool.
Right.
And what we've noticed there were two things actually. When a lot of founders were buying this type of software, they did not necessarily have the time to actually leverage it themselves. They were really ambitious to do it, but then there was still a lack of time. Secondly, there was not only that, is the moment that you actually start hiring SDRs or people that will actually work with that software, they were looking for juniors. It's overall it's a position that currently is being worked by juniors. And we saw that once again, you were hiring someone that doesn't necessarily have the skill set yet and the expertise of making sure you're taking full advantage of the investment you've done in that type of software. So then we said,
and they're being hired by people who don't necessarily want to do the work either. So there's like this, who's going to do it?
It's like,
thing, and who's going to train
right.
it? Yeah.
You're right. It's like I don't want to get my hands dirty type of work. So, but then, okay, so the reflection was me and my two co-founders, like, what, just another agency? Like, there's already quite a few out there.
Yeah.
So we focused on two layers in the way we wanted to differentiate. It was what, first of all, was I think a lot of tools were making the shift at the time between, okay, you have a database of people, and then let's just pull them into some kind of sequence that includes calling, that includes an email, etc. And that was about it. While we saw that actually technology, different type of technologies, could actually start helping you to prioritize the people that you were actually going to target, and you could actually make sure that you first target the people that are more likely to wanting to talk to you, and we'll go into that in this episode as well.
I mean, talking of people who want to talk to you, there was one really important point that I wanted to get to about your service that I found real interesting. For those that are listening, Samuel's not sitting in the US. He's I think you're in Portugal, correct?
I'm currently Portugal based.
Right. And so his service, his company has a multitude of languages available to it. Which I found, and I think you speak 2 or 3 languages yourself, and your 4 languages. There you go. And then your co-founders, multilingual, your reps, so on and so forth. So when you think about it from a global standpoint, that's fascinating. But it also opens the door to other learnings too, when you're not, limited to that one modality of English. You had shared your story about calling into the States and what you learned from a multilingual standpoint there. Why don't you share with the audience that point?
Yeah. So that's quite an interesting point. We work on, our DNA is A/B testing, and we learned that working together in the previous company, and we really thought that was essential. So one of the things that we wanted to test was, okay, what if you send emails to people in their own language, because that's how I would like to be treated, and also the way you could stand out from the crowd at a certain moment, because I think everybody receives a lot of emails in English, but how many times have you received one in Spanish if you're native Spanish? And so we tested it. We A/B tested a couple of campaigns for a couple of clients that were addressing people in their native tongue, and it wasn't actually that much of a surprise that it was leading to better results. But it was double. It was 2x the results that you would be expecting from a campaign. Again, it really depends on the specific industries as well. And I'm not here to be the one claiming everybody should start doing it everywhere. No, it's about A/B testing for me. But we also understood that, okay, if this is what brings results, then if you're hiring for SDRs and account managers, you should hire to enrich yourself with even more languages. So that's why whenever we are looking for a new talent to join our team, is like, okay, what are you bringing? Which language are you bringing? Which skill set are you bringing that we do not have yet?
I'm sure salespeople see this all the time. We see it a lot, particularly in tech and SaaS, where a lot of the founders are, where English is their second language. I think that's what we're touching on here, is that if you can connect with that founder or that CMO, whoever your target decision maker is, but if you can identify with their primary languages and to reach out to them that way. Now, if I'm an English speaker only myself and I'm trying to use this play there's probably some tools like Google Translate. You had
Yeah,
recommended Deeple, I think it is D2ESPL.com,
yeah,
Deeple.com, which
exactly.
I just tried out before hopping on here, and it was real easy to just type in what you're trying to say and choose your language, and it has like 150 different languages or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
and they give an additional functionality if you go premium, which is like, do you want the translation to be informal, formal? So different type of yeah, different type of tones, basically.
mhm.
Um, I mean, it's an interesting topic that I think a lot of companies can explore even further. I think the moment you go into the hyper growth phase, I think a lot of companies go into those, okay, I will hire a rep specifically for different countries, which I
Right.
think is something only done at that stage and not earlier. While it could give you a more insights into, the earlier you try it, the earlier you can also even understand which market or should I be focusing on.
Goes back to A/B testing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's certainly it. I mean, the one thing that I can add is, if the audience is like, oh, but I only speak one language. We've tried it at some moment. We said to one of our SDRs, oh, but okay, now try and reach out in French. You don't know French. How would you do it? And the case study was quite interesting, because he assumed basically in the emails that, okay, well, if I'm not French, but I can easily try and speak some French, and then if they come back to me, I can easily reply back in English and say, hey, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I'm still learning French, so if you don't mind, I would like to continue the conversation in English. And actually people are really understanding towards those type of conversations. And same thing if you have to move the conversation from an SDR to an AE. Let's say your SDR speaks Italian and your AE does not. I have never witnessed the problem that if an SDR books a meeting in Italian and then says, hey, do you mind that the English that my colleague will do the call? He only speaks English, but I assume looking at your profile that should be fine. I have never had anyone saying that doesn't work. So just speaking one language, I wouldn't say is an excuse anymore today. It's
Right.
because of the tools, right? That was the point I wanted to make.
Well, I'm going to be prospecting in your backyard then after this.
That's
Well, I
good.
think what we're teetering on in this conversation is getting into total addressable market, serviceable
Hmm.
addressable market, getting into really getting away from overestimating our addressable
Yeah.
market. And so these are, topics that I think kind of teeter on the cusp of that. But when we were in our conversation offline, you had
Hmm.
mentioned that overestimating one's total addressable market, the TAM, is one of the biggest issues that you're seeing with some of your new clients and just in general out there in the space is, folks thinking that this is just an infinite up game, right? There's just
Yeah.
always enough opportunity out there. So let's go there. Give me your perspective on why you think overestimating total addressable market is a big challenge for companies going into 2024.
In general, I think it comes down to something we all know, which is calculations in sheets and Excels, and because a lot of people are currently preparing for this new year that is arriving
Exactly.
with calculations of this is where we're going to go in order to get this number of meetings or this number of closed deals. I need to send out hundreds of thousands of emails, or I need to do this number of calls. But what I felt a lot, and one specific case study that we've worked in the past that actually taught me a lot in that matter was, okay, first of all, if you want to know where you're going to be, you need to be selling. You need to be the one actually on writing the emails, trying to understand, get on the calls, on the just to understand, okay, are people currently warm for the type of product that we're having, yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
Because once you go in, you translate that into numbers in your Excel file or in your, I don't know, the numerous types of,
The TAM analysis. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
I think everybody already saw those. And what happens often is like, okay, the moment that translates into a number, there's expectations attached to it. So
Quotas.
Quotas, yeah, and which means commissions and all and pressure on top of that, because it's not
Well,
only
then there's
about,
the A and B rounds of investment that your investors are looking for,
yeah.
their money as well. Yep.
So what happens is, and this is literally the let me always walk through my experience that explains where I want to arrive, is that we started actually reaching out for this particular company that was in the insurance space, and we said, look, before we can actually train your people on how to do stuff, we would like to try and get those demos in. And when we were doing that, in 3 months we clearly showed that we had value to bring to the company, and that we could really teach quite some things to their reps. We noticed that the VP had actually taken our numbers and put it into an Excel file and said, okay, now everybody should be able to do that. So when we say everybody, we were 1 rep versus all of a sudden 6 reps. However, that starts with the assumption that if you, for example, say we have 20 companies that wanted to talk to us in a month, and then all of a sudden you're saying now, no, there's 6 more reps, 6 times 20, that would say you're now expecting that there is 120 companies every single month that are interested in learning about my product. That's quite some confidence you have in your own product, right, and your product market fit, right?
When you're still working on your first 20 customers, right? Mm-hmm.
And that's where we then saw that the moment it turns into that number, into whatever software you're using to do that, the founders or the investors came and say, no, okay, if this are the numbers, now you need to hire 20 reps or even more, and we need to speak to as many companies as we can. But what you automatically are doing is, if you're doing that, is you're basically increasing your costs with 20 reps quite in a scale that I think is too fast, compared to actually not knowing specifically how many companies effectively are interested into the market. Yeah, I mean, and that's where I feel sometimes I prefer to speak and talk with people that are like, okay, we've already done this, we know it didn't work, and now we have this realistic view on things, and we are ready to work. So I always try to understand that in the conversations that I'm having. But in general, people are currently, I think 2023 was for everybody a tough year, and I think a lot of companies had to pivot in order to stay alive. And I think that's where I feel that the sales community is also is more mature in that perspective now. And that's why I recommend everyone is like to keep listening to the market by looking into intent data signals from multiple sources that can tell you which markets are currently interesting, but also scaling your sales team accordingly to what you see in terms of the number of meetings that your other reps are actually able to book. I think that's way more important than, in my opinion, than having those numbers and those prognosis perfectly spot on. That's why, for example, for me, commissions have to be focused on realistic data, not necessarily on
well, data. Territories need to be based, and quotas need to be based off of realistic data, and as a result, then commissions and so forth will follow. But I agree with you. It happens all the time. We see it. Our early stage startup takes on funding. With that funding, they take on a ton of pressure to get the returns and start scaling and getting double-digit growth immediately. And so the minute they find some signal of success, while may not be total repeatable, they kind of put all their chips in on that bet and extrapolate one learning lesson and then start hiring like crazy. And the communication, I think, is a piece that you talked to a little bit in there, that when we get into this mode of growth at all cost, we sacrifice really dissecting what's working and what's not working, and the failures, and who's not inhaling our product right away. And we fast track through all the critical learnings, the learning mode, if you will, and we get straight into, what's our target for the quota, what's our forecast. When we're still early like that, that's the opportune time to really refine our focus, understand what are the signals that that lead to, and the triggers that lead to conversion.
Right.
And for those that are maybe new to the total addressable market discussion, that's your TAM is going to be basic firmographic targeting, right? That's going to be the total ocean. But then when you think about what's in their environment, maybe technographics is a big one that kind of helps you trim that funnel down. So think of a funnel with your total addressable market, right? Think of at the top you have anybody with a pulse that could potentially even think about your product, and then you dwindle that down to a point where it's actually less is more, right? And in that middle layer, if we had three in this funnel, you have your serviceable addressable market, and that's people who can really probably utilize your product, but you haven't had a conversation with them, and you haven't really uncovered what's happening in their environment and whether or not now is a good time. But on the surface, based on firmographics, technographics, and maybe some other signals, that they could be a good fit. So you're refining this down. But what your team does, which I found fascinating, is getting to that bottom, that third layer of your addressable market, getting into your serviceable, attainable market, is using intent data. And you kind of alluded to that already, and using multiple sources to triangulate, if you will, and validate some of these signals so that that they're actionable. And you were sharing some stats with me offline, some A/B testing where reply rates and open rates were pretty good. But then your team turned things on with a more refined focus using the intent data that's proprietary to you. And you were able to, in some cases, double some of these stats. So go a little deeper for me on, and to whatever degree you can for our audience.
Yeah, sure.
This intent data method that you're using, because I think we're all familiar with the intent data that we get in Zoom Info, the intent data we get from 6 Sense, and some of these, top of mind players in that realm. But you're doing something that's more proprietary. So without giving us the formula, can you at least talk to the approach a little bit more in detail?
Yeah, absolutely. It starts again with our wish to be even more. It's what the name revenue precision stands for. It's like, how can you be even more precise in selling to the right people? A lot of sales campaigns that even when we started, there's a lot of there's a hit and miss, but there's a lot of miss and not a lot of hits, right? So what you need to do is like, okay, how can you actually hedge that problem and try to solve that one? And so what we do is always the same. Let's go and A/B test. Let's put ourselves together. Let's do some small, what we call internal hackathons, and let's try and figure out on what we call it the buying spectrum, which is basically a spectrum between on the left hand side you have people that are absolutely not in the market to sell, but they're simply part of your serviceable market, simply because of the fact that they are within that ICP that you defined initially. Okay. But then you have people on the right hand side of that spectrum that say, I'm ready to buy it tomorrow. The perfect example of one of those is an inbound lead. Okay, an inbound lead wants to learn more about your product and has already some information, and you just need to guide the experience. So whenever you see that spectrum, what we try to do is find strategies that bring us more into that right hand side of things, which is how close can we actually get to that inbound lead. And like you said, then what we did was we tested intent data that is currently available in the sales enablement market. Right. And I bet that when people are listening to this part of the conversation, that they say, "Yeah, I've tried it; doesn't work."
Noisy. There's a lot of noise. I mean, that's what I said when you and I first spoke. Was like, well, does intent data really work? I mean, it seems,
And that's where we have a problem now, because now we need to start defining what intent data is, right? Especially because I feel that intent data, like the way everybody sees it, is data that is basically telling you what Google searches have been done
Right.
inside of
Someone
a
at that
specific
company
company.
is looking for something like what you do. I mean,
Yeah,
it could be pretty vague, quite
yeah.
frankly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's the type of information that you have available. So every time when we purchase a specific intent data solution to test, I always asked, okay, what exactly are you evaluating as intent? And they were always, it's something we don't necessarily always want to disclose, etc. And I was telling them, yeah, but that's very difficult because I know that in order for any email that I'm sending out to anyone really to be effective, there needs to be relevance in the email. So if you're not
Right.
telling me why exactly I can reach out to that person, or if you can tell me what the exact reason is that that person
Context,
currently
right? There's no contextual
exactly make it
signals.
hard,
Yeah.
like yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was literally a problem that we saw with multiple solutions out there.
Okay.
um, with a couple of exceptions, because we in general we saw that okay, there must be ways that you can follow digital breadcrumbs online with low tech that you can for a couple of bucks find online. There must be ways of trying stuff, and that's when we really started to we have actually it's just a PowerPoint slide where we have that spectrum, and each month we try to add a new strategy on that spectrum that basically we try to and we tried a couple of those. I think the one that we've been using for like 1.5 years and that is now getting a little bit more commoditized is when somebody is actually changing a job. I think we all know how to filter those leads, whether it's monthly or quarterly. I think a lot of people are using that, but we said no, I need to know it tomorrow, because if it changed it now, or if she changed it now on their LinkedIn, for example, then that's because they're now proud of it. So that means now is also the time to just send them an email or give them a call, just saying congrats.
But isn't everybody else doing that though? I mean, everybody
Yeah,
knows the job change trigger. So
yeah.
is
But
that
my
really the
question is,
best
how
time
many people?
to innovate,
It's a good
to reach out?
question.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good question. The question is for me is double, because one, I think a lot of people actually do that, but do you do it at the right moment, or do you? Yeah, you did it because they are within that 3 month space of they have recently changed, or do you know that they yesterday changed their profile? It's like you said, it's not the most sexy example, right?
Right.
Let me go to another example that I think is more relevant. Is what is the holy grail of understanding people that are currently looking for your product is knowing which competitors currently have proposals outstanding with people out there,
Okay.
right?
That would be, I'd pay
That's
for
the holy
that.
grail.
Mm-hmm.
I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people would be really willing to know what's going on in the pipeline of their competitor, and so did we. So we said, okay, how do you do that? Like that was one of the questions that we
Sounds
had.
like a black hat some
Yeah.
hacking going on.
Well, exactly. I mean, obviously, at some point, somebody proposed, yeah, but why don't we just hack into the Salesforce? And I was like, okay, there's a possibility, but we're crossing a line, right? And I think in general there should be other ways, not necessarily at that accurate because it's impossible, but there must be ways that you can see on LinkedIn, but also on other platforms where that people are currently looking into their specific
Right.
website or their product, etc. And we tried a couple of things. First two didn't really perform the way we wanted, but the third one was actually was a hit. We understood that the people were actually interested in just more information based on the fact that we had found a trigger that was basically telling us that we know at least that you have a competitor, and yeah, okay, so obviously the hit or miss is still there, right? It's not a
Yeah, so you're
intent
saying if
data
there's a
isn't.
competitor installed,
Yeah,
right? There's a
sorry, it's so
competitive
difficult to
displacement
not
opportunity. Yeah.
share it. It's
Exactly.
not
I thought you were going to go
it's
there.
not
I really.
yeah, that's why Derek
But
is so
let
good
me let me let
at
me interrupt you.
asking the
So
right questions.
just to
Yeah,
double
yeah.
click here. So what
Mm-hmm.
touching on and kind of dancing around here a little bit is being
Yeah,
able to have
sorry for dancing.
visibility into, if there's a prospect, you know who else they're engaged with potentially, right? Who else they're
Yeah,
accepting proposals from. And we're all probably familiar with public bid systems, RFPs and things like that are
yeah.
issued out from, government entities, municipalities will make public bids. But in the private
100%.
sector, we solicit bids privately, generally speaking,
Hmm.
right? And so if a
That's a brilliant
CMO needs a
comparison.
new, marketing automation tool, they're not telling the world about that. They're going online and they're searching, going back to the intent data
Yeah.
conversation. They're filling out forms or taking discovery calls and these sorts of things. So what you're saying is there's a way through your proprietary intent data model
Yeah.
that you can get signals that get you close to understanding who's actively engaged. Now, let me finish as well, because when we go back to the technographic conversation, or just
Hmm.
serviceable addressable market, one of the things that does exist in the marketplace is like contract end dates, right? If my contract is coming due with, I mentioned Zoom Info earlier,
Yeah.
I'm 3 months out.
Yeah.
There's a way to get intelligence around that, infer that data today with other
Yeah.
providers. But what you're saying is that we can actually see who's actively in dialogue to a degree. And you can't tell us how you do that. That's what makes you special and different, and how you help your clients. But it seems like that would be, like you said, the holy grail. And
I mean,
talk
yeah.
about some of the numbers, though. I think that's where I wanted
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
really
Sure.
end up on, is when you have that kind of signals and that kind of, you're reaching out in language. If English isn't their first language, you're really
Correct.
getting down to an obtainable market
Hmm.
persona, and then you're using intent signals like that indicate that they're engaged already to reach out. So I could imagine that your open rates, your reply rates on your initial outreach, your cold outreach are really high.
Especially because we have context. That's what we were missing with the other intent. So in this case, if you really know the intent signal, or if you know the context that was associated to it, it's now easier to write a relevant email.
Right.
And in this specific case, we
Right.
A/B tested multiple ones, but we basically just wrote them saying, "Hey, it looks like you currently are in conversations with X. Am I correct?" That's the question is directly, it's out there. So the only thing they have to respond is like, "Hey, that's interesting." Obviously, people then are interested. Hey, but how did you know? Okay, that happens, and you can easily respond to them. Hey, a partner of mine mentioned it, so I was curious if it was true. And then whenever you have that, at least you're, the interesting part of this specific intent signal is the fact that our results were, let me first go into the open rates that were 70-80% on this one, because
Wow.
you mentioned it in
The
the
subject
subject
line.
line.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the email as well, there's the reply rate was way higher, obviously, as well. I think around,
Because
I don't
it's
know.
relevant, it's personalized, it's
Yeah,
contextualized.
to the right person, because this
Right,
time,
right.
it's not, I'm not guessing who is actually speaking, right? You know the person. So that's why it's you're touching on the relevant people. And then what you can easily do is you can easily say, hey, yeah, but I mean, it was one of my partners. I will investigate which one it was, because I don't remember, and I'll get back to you. And then if you don't get back, people
They
never
did.
really.
So
It's
basically, you just
also,
shove it to the side a little bit. You kind of just
yeah, why?
bypass
Because
it.
eventually
Mm,
what you're trying to do, and let's not forget why I got into sales, was because the only thing you want is genuine relationships that you want to
right.
build. So if this is a good fit, then let's have the conversation. Like, if you're looking for a solution like this, then at least do your due diligence and evaluate multiple options. If it's not correct, then okay, then the answer is also no, I'm currently not interested, and that's also fine, right? So it's not necessarily something that people should be afraid of, in my opinion. Um, so okay, so then the reply rates were also around, I think, 30%, something like that. So it's
It's
simply
unheard of.
because
Yeah.
unheard of. But and I need to make this one parenthesis here, right? It's not that like you build a database of people that you want to reach out to here. It's the number of leads that you receive through this type of analytics is also restricted.
Small.
Like,
yeah, and that's what we were saying before, is you need to dwindle
exactly,
that, distill that funnel down into people who are actually someone you can obtain. Yeah.
So the conversion from the number of people that you actually put into the sequence towards how many interested leads you were getting from that, we saw that was between 4 and 5%, which today is quite good. If you compare that, of course, if people speak about the results in 2018, that was also a time where we still saw 4%, 5%. But if someone knows how to do a cold emailing with 4 or 5% right now, I would love to speak to them. So that's really difficult. So that's why we understood this is working well. But the real curiosity came when we started using this for a couple of use cases. And there was one specific company that reached out to me. It was a phone number I never heard of, so I didn't even expect it was a client, but it was actually the CEO of the company. So usually I interacted with the VP of sales, and now it was the CEO that wanted to just thank me for the year. I'm talking about 2022, and it was just saying, hey, it's incredible, not from the perspective of the number of meetings that it booked, because I mean I have a lot of reps, and this was just one of them. But what was interesting, he says, is if I look at my stats right now, is the best predictor for a deal to close was actually your signal. So rather than only looking at the conversions, it was
all the way through.
All the way through. So there was another use case in cybersecurity where I received a phone call of the VP of Sales, Sam. Like we're leveraging this now for 2 weeks, and there was one of my reps that called me 2 days ago saying, "Where do you get this data?" I just called someone out of the blue, and I said, "Hey, sorry for catching you, but it seems like you currently are looking for a solution that does this." And the prospect actually just replied, yeah, I already have a proposal on the table of your competitors. So if you want...
Well, you said it's a really important point that comes up in a lot of like SDR conversations. Do we mention that when we reach out, right? Do you say, hey, it looks like you're looking for something like this solution, or do you try and go around the bush a little bit and
A/B test it? I think it depends on the ICP. I really think it depends. I noticed, for example, with salespeople. So if you're selling to salespeople, they don't mind if you call it out.
They know the technology's out there. It's not weird to them.
If you're more looking into people that, for example, it's all about compliance and it's all about
your risk managers and things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why it's about A/B testing again. I think the messaging itself is a whole game on its own. But we noticed that if you don't, and that's in general, for any campaign that you currently run, whether it's via phone calls or emails, if you use the right context, people will listen, and that's the key. So that means if you have a signal, you need to leverage the information. Otherwise, it's kind of useless, because the person you wrote that email to received 10 or 15 other emails.
Right, exactly. That's what I was saying about the job change trigger earlier. Is they're all getting inundated, but the difference is you're layering.
It's the right timing.
Yeah, but you're also layering in the contextual insights that you have as well. Not just that, hey, it looks like you changed jobs and then you default back to your standard persona messaging. You're saying looks like you changed jobs and it looks like you're looking for something like this right. So it's really refined.
But I think now it's good also, like, if you agree with me, like to move away now from this specific signal into, like, again, the realm of other signals that are out there. Simply because I can talk at least an hour just about the different type of signals that you could try as a company. But the idea is that what I want people to take away from this specific conversation would be build a layered system of a prioritized outreach. It's good to have a cold sequence running to people in your ICP. On top of that, try to see who is a little bit more interested. It's okay to use some of the other intent data out there just to see if it works. And on top of that, always go higher in terms of priority. And the higher you go in terms of the value of a specific signal, the more personalized it should be in approaching that prospect. So see it really as different layers that I think you could give different responsibilities to different reps, or you could give them a way of looking at their own book of business with that view. That's up to the way your company works. But I think giving them that layered, I call it like kind of augmented reality glasses over their market that they are targeting. Yeah, that's for me. That is a rep on steroids for me. Someone that really can look into his market and see, okay, today this is the person I need to catch. Even if almost I have to take the plane to show up at the office, this signal is so important, I don't want to miss it. I mean, up until that point, right? Knowing that rep at the same time has some leads going out to some cold prospects that are also in his book of business, which he shouldn't neglect.
Right, exactly.
And that's why this.
But you're talking that goes back to the prioritization of like, you know, let's put our focus where it needs to be right now at this moment.
Yeah. So that's why when we go all the way back to what we mentioned in the beginning, it's that the idea of, you know, just to make sure I'm not losing any business, let me just hire 20 reps and let them go do whatever they do, is now, no, reduce maybe the number of reps that you have and invest that money that
and raise your signals. Right.
Exactly. Right. And raise that because you're basically supercharging the people that you've already trained. Otherwise you need to go through the same process of onboarding and training some people that never. So you see, instead of, if every rep that is now hitting your quota could, with different signals, tomorrow hit 40% more, you'll also get to the meetings, the number of meetings that you actually wanted, or even to the actual business that you closed. Again, and here is me. I'm talking here after doing this for 4 or 5 years now, and I mean, it's not that this is the only solution, but I think it helps this view just to get a little bit out of the view that a lot of people in the industry proclaim, or to evangelize, the way evangelists work in general. I think it helps you to think about this in a different way.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Sales Consultant Podcast. If you'd like to support the show, it would go a long way if you were to write a short review on the listening app of your choice.